When I worked at Meta, Sam was the company and the name that we would always bring up in our chats behind the scenes. The way that Meta works is we look at different categories that are emerging on the AR VR Quest platform, and then we can see the numbers, and so we'll lean in on like these are the categories that seem to be emerging. And you know, I remember when my team sat down with me and said, "Hey, we're going to focus on fitness." I thought to myself, like, fitness for virtual reality? What are you talking about? It made literally no sense to me. And if I put myself back in the shoes of where I was 10 years ago getting into VR, gaming I thought would be a hit, remote work I thought would be a hit, but like fitness really never even crossed my mind. And so Sam, you're not just someone that's been a great founder, but like you're truly a visionary in the way that you've actually created a category. You have the leading app for fitness at Meta, in XR in general, and the way that we always kind of talked about it with our team was that there was two ways we'd look at fitness. One was like on purpose fitness, and then one was accidental fitness. And so accidental fitness, we would always bring up Beat Saber and talk about how people were going in there and getting a workout without really knowing it. But you were like the first app, at least that I was aware of, where you said like, we are going to use this headset and this new medium as a way to help people get in shape. And so it's pretty dang impressive that you were able to see around the corner and figure that out. And so for this conversation, I want to talk about fundraising. I want to talk about a lot of different things, but where I'd like to start is, how did you come up with this idea of fitness for VR? And how crazy did that feel when you did initially come up with it compared to the other things that were out there?
Yeah, and thanks for the kind words on the intro, Don. I think for me, it was like in around 2013 or 2014, I was really interested in what was happening with both Magic Leap and with Oculus. Um, and I was the sort of kid growing up who always had like loads of wacky ideas of things that I wanted to go and build, some of which I did, but none quite as audacious as what became FitXR. And I remember at the time thinking, I think one of these devices or both of these devices are going to be the next computing platform, and people are going to exercise radically differently when that happens. Um, and I remember the actual distinct moment that I decided to go all in on this. I was for people who live in London, I was in a Pure Gym, and it was the Angel Pure Gym in London, and it's like very uninspiring, full of loads of guys grunting, and it's actually underground to make the whole thing even more depressing. Um, and I think the main critique that I'd been coming up against like, will people work out in AR glasses or a VR headset, was like it would feel unnatural to do so. And I remember leaving, well, like being in that space and just observing how people were working out. And I was like, this whole thing is unnatural, like exercise is unnatural. Like this is just a made up thing that we've just created to try and keep ourselves active, and otherwise largely or increasingly sedentary lifestyles. Um, this whole space is unnatural. And I also thought like, hey, a lot of people are here wearing, um, over-ear headphones, and that's not natural. And you would never call it this, but they are augmenting their reality. They're bringing in an audio layer to enhance their experience. And so I left, I had this big, I suppose, realization. I was like, shit, I think someone's going to build in this space. I think it's going to be massive.
What
Um,
year was that for context?
I think that must have been 2014. And I remember I came home and told my wife, and she was very supportive, and she was like, we should go try and build it. And we started working initially more with Magic Leap than with Oculus. We, like a lot of people at that time, right, had been intrigued by how much money they had raised, how amazing everyone said those demos were, and we wanted to get on the early access dev program. And so we spent a lot of time talking to Magic Leap, and we found quite a few believers there who really wanted to work on fitness as a vertical. So the initial concept was, let's have visuals overlaid on top of a boxing bag, and let's guide and enhance someone through a workout experience. And it could be very functional. Like the idea in the beginning was, let's treat these visual layers as quite personalizable. So could either be very functional or it could be, really driven around like monsters appearing out of the bag and you had to hit those monsters back in. And after probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months going back and forth with Magic Leap, they eventually said to us, like, hey, we love the angle. We just don't think we're going to be consumer ready enough for you to survive as a business. And we think as a result that you should build for Oculus. They are way more consumer ready. At this stage, they had just released the DK2. And they were like, we're way more consumer ready, and you should start building for that platform. And so I think at that stage we decided to spend more time thinking about VR, and I think we had quite an interesting journey because we had a lot of the same misconceptions that most people have before they try working out in a VR headset. We were like, isn't it going to be weird? Like
Right.
at that stage, right? There's cables everywhere, there's sensors, like um, we just thought that would be like this big, tangled, sweaty, horrible mess. And we built a really basic boxing prototype. We also did spin and rowing because we were intrigued to see take like the best form factors and the best modalities from fitness, particularly group fitness, and apply them to VR. Um, and we found ourselves getting lost in the boxing experience. Like it was so crude and so basic. But we found ourselves getting lost in it and forgetting that we were exercising in a headset. And that's when we felt like, hey, we're onto something. We're on something here. And we then tried to push as quickly as possible from that moment to get onto Steam and release in early access.
So are you, prior to the whole like AR VR, are you just naturally someone that had an affinity for fitness in your life? Is that something you always valued? Or maybe talk about less on the tech side and more about just like your actual interest in fitness?
Yeah, I think so. This only became clear to me in the last couple of years, but my co-founder Samir and I had completely different fitness habits. And I think that's been a real strength to what we've built now. So I was the sort of person who I played a lot of sport growing up. I played a lot of rugby in New Zealand. And I always like had this idea that I needed to train like an athlete. So I had highly optimized, or what I thought were highly optimized workout routines. Now my problem was like, how do I form a habit around this? And often I would break that routine and then it would take me a long time to spin back up again. So it wasn't really been effective. It certainly didn't make sense that it was highly optimized, but that was how I was working out. I also really liked the group fitness angle because for me, that was like training in a sports team. And so I would get the accountability, the camaraderie, the competitiveness. Samir, my co-founder, was the complete opposite. He hated the idea of going to the gym. I had to drag him to group fitness experiences, but he loved snackable workouts. He loved things like the 7 minute workout. And for him, he was really predicated around like, I'm going to try and build a habit around fitness, and anything is better than nothing. And I think what's interesting is like our modes of working out now are the complete opposites of what they used to be. So I'm like, I really try and live by the mindset of I'm going to try and sweat every day, irrespective of what that comes. Like often that's FitXR, that could be going for a run, it could be doing some weights. I try and think about balance, but I'm much more focused on the habit. And Samir's like, he's in the gym, he calls the gym his happy place. Um, but I think our very different approaches to exercise were important for us to be able to build a product that can serve both people who are inactive prior to finding FitXR, but also people who are working out 5 times a week.
There's a lot to go through in this conversation because you've raised almost $30 million. You've been at this from 2014, 2015. You have a lot of traction. You're one of the leading apps, just not even just fitness, but across the whole store. Um, but I think one thing that I've appreciated knowing you, and like you and Tom from FitXR were the first two calls I made when I was starting this spatial collective business. And I remember right before we did our first ever webinar 7 months ago, you got on the phone with me and you basically like said, no, don't do that. Don't do this. Don't do this. You should do this. And I kind of changed my whole plan on what I was going to do with this business I've been working on like right before. And so all that's to say is that I really think you have like a very sharp mind for business and entrepreneurship. And so before we get into the tech and before we get into the fundraising and all that, two things I want to cover. How important is your physical health for running a business? Because I think I've found it to be incredibly important. I think it's overlooked by a lot of people. So maybe talk about like physical and mental health. What are some of the habits that, besides the sweating, like what are the things that founders should be doing that are outside of business that actually do correlate directly back to building a strong company?
Yeah, I think like in a in a post Elon buying Twitter world, there's definitely this mindset back inside tech of like grinding and intensity and working at all hours. Um, and something that I really believe in is this idea of like absolutely work at intensity, but you have to find out a way to do that in a balanced way to be able to do it on a long-term basis. Um, and so for me, like I mentioned at the top of the call, like I've got two kids, finding that balance between like having enough family time and also having my head in the right space at all moments of time for work is critically important. Um, you're also right that for me, exercise now is probably more important for me from a mental health standpoint and making sure that I'm at my best in that regard as opposed to like the physical aspects of it. Um, and so I block out like a minute. I've got like a minimum of a 30-minute slot in my day every day for fitness. I'm like uncompromising with it. It's really important for me to have that balance. And yeah, with that mindset of all like I want to be able to work intensely, but over a 10-year time period, right? Rather than burn myself out after 1 year and not be able to function after that.
Yeah, my last business, I'm 190 pounds now, but I got up to 225 pounds by the time I was shutting down my last startup. And it was just so obvious that I had basically let my health go, thinking that was, those are hours I should be putting towards the business. And I think hopefully a lot of founders here, maybe some of them are going through that, but it's really important that you think about staying healthy because ultimately that is what's going to drive your success over 10 years and not the short term 1 year, as you
100%.
said.
So like sleep, like exercise, sleep, nutrition,
Yeah.
and then balance in your life, right? Like it can't be all work and nothing but work. And whether that's like family or friends or whatever you find gives you that balance, I think balance enables you to work with that high level of intensity over a long time period.
Yeah. And so going to fundraising now and tying that into the last point, fundraising, at least when I was doing it, it felt very much like a sprint. Like, hey, this is like the 3 months where it's all out, balls to the walls, fundraising mode. And that was usually when I would kind of get off my health kick the most. So do you allow yourself, during fundraising moments to kind of lean into that more than the health side of things? Or maybe talk about your general fundraising strategy and how you organize yourself throughout that process. Because raising the amount of money you've raised, the close to 30 million, is a lot of different sprints over what, 8 years of time. So can you talk
Yeah.
about specifically your expertise there in your process?
I think it's like definitely evolved over time. And it's funny, like I really don't think of myself as a good fundraiser, nor do I like fundraising. You know, like some entrepreneurs are fantastic at it and love it, right? And that's not me. Um, I've grown to like aspects of it. Like I love to meet smart people who are able to um, like give you that really quick internal injection around how your business is perceived externally, and often that's quite helpful in terms of positioning and future strategy. I think what I learned over the years, which was really helpful for me, was not to try and win over every single investor, but rather to find the believers in the space. Like if everyone on this call, right? Like I don't know what percentage of investors have an active thesis in VR. It varies, right? Where the hype cycle is at. But I spent a lot of time in those early stages with investors who were never going to make a VR deal, no matter how good our numbers were. They just didn't believe enough in the overall space and where that was heading. And so I spent a lot of time trying to convince them and persuade them that VR was something that they should be investing in. And that's ultimately just not a great use of your time. And it certainly wasn't a good use of my time. And it like beats you up as well because you obviously, everyone on this call really deeply believes in this space. And so you're like preaching to people who don't believe. Um, and so I think once I found like and rethought that and started thinking like, hey, my actual job here is not to convert the unconverted, it's to find the people who already believe, then my life and my enjoyment around fundraising became, a lot simpler. I think to answer your question, like, really directly around what I'm doing in those times, like I try and find that balance. Like the worst moments for me fundraising are where you've got like a million internal fires, you're flying to different locations, you're out of the office all the time, you're trying to balance internal with meeting all these investors and to try and keep your life in check. And I think that that's really, really challenging to do. Um, so when I do it now, I think about it more in terms of stages. So we'll have a definite period of prep and getting everything in order to be able to go out and run a process. We'll know exactly who we want to talk to, and we'll have often built connections with those people over a longer period of time, sometimes years before we go and actually meet them in person and actually pitch to them. And then we have a very dedicated block of time where we're like, okay, we're going to go out and do a bit of a roadshow here. And for me, it's always been really important, even post-COVID, to try and do that in person. So the last time we did this, it was flying, like it was LA, San Fran, New York, London, all over the space of I think about 10 days. And it's about ramming as many meetings as possible into that time period. And during that time period, I'm basically completely off all of the internal stuff, um, aside from any emergencies, just to make sure you again got your head in the game and you're really focused around what you're doing at any point in time.
I I I like the idea of stages. I think this is something that, like, whether you're seed, series A, B, or pre-seed, this works really well. I did something very similar where you basically have all those intro meetings, but you're not fundraising yet. As you said, it's kind of just networking. And then I would schedule all of my kickoff pitch meetings with as many investors as possible in the same week. So just like you said, in a 5-10 day period, like back to back to back. And what I found the advantage for that was that it creates urgency amongst the investors, because now you can say, oh, I'm going and chatting with so and so later today, and I'm talking with so and so later today. And so I would have months of conversations where I was not fundraising, just so that I could fill up my 1 week later on that I was fundraising. Is that similar to how you think about it?
Yeah, completely. I think the advice I got that really summarizes this was from another founder who loved fundraising and was very successful with it. And and he was like, you could, as a founder in those conversations, you control very little, but you can control the process. And you control like all the stages, however you're calling it. So it's like, I think that was really good advice. YC do a really great fundraising guide, which also unpacks all of this and talks about how they think about staging investors. Um, and so I would like, if people are thinking about this right now, I'd really encourage them to dig into that. And Don, we can find that link and share it afterwards if it's helpful.
All right, let me make a note. That's awesome. All right, so just for everybody listening, we're going to open up the floor for questions. So start to think of some of your questions, and we'll have you come up here and chat with Sam directly. But Sam, one question before then for myself. So on the traction side, how did you get started with your first 10,000 users? What does that process look like? How manual is it versus automated? Can you maybe go into the details of how people can think about that when they're starting something?
Yeah, so when we first launched, the way to launch a VR title was to launch in early access on Steam, and then like that was the go-to route, right? Or go through to direction. So um, we launched on Steam, and it felt really, really early, and we were really uncomfortable about hitting go and shipping. And then from that moment onwards, we got like that initial kernel of traction, and then we just spoke to our community constantly. And again, Steam does this, like it's really easy to do that in the Steam community pages. Um, and we just built what we thought our customers wanted and what they were telling us they wanted. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I think the next like really influential point on our journey was launching on the Oculus store. So the early Oculus team, you're right, this was like late 2017. And then we actually went live very early 2018. And I think the best thing that Oculus did early, they were like willing to take a punt. They were going like, hey, we've never thought about exercise. It seems kind of quirky to us. we don't really think they didn't really think it was going to work. Um, but they launched it, and I remember getting a call from Phil Greenspan, our DevRel guy, and he's like, "Wow, this is kicking ass. We're going to feature this all weekend." And uh, and from that moment, it was like obviously a massive inflection point for us as an organization. Um, but I also think it was really that was like you said, it was the first fitness title on the store. Um, but I think that like going back to like that early cycle of like releasing early, finding those first 100 or 1,000 or whatever number of customers, and then building that community with them and talking to them intensely. I heard something that the other day about gym class that I loved on this note. Apparently, I don't know if this is true. We'll have to ask the team. Apparently, they have their community and their team all working from the same Discord, and their team are obviously just to have a whole bunch of private channels. But I was like, I freaking love that. I think there's like imagine that you can't avoid seeing all of the community feedback in your Discord channel. And I was like, that seems like an amazing way to build a community centered company. And I think that's so critical in the early days.
Yeah, and if I recall, I think they have 70,000 people in their Discord, and we were working with them with my team at Meta, and when they launched on the store, they already had like 45, 50,000 people in that Discord. So to your point, they made that the top priority, and they emphasized, let's make sure that everybody is happy in there and giving feedback.
Love it.
Um, do you see other so taking it back 2014, you come up with this idea, maybe fitness would work for XR. You don't really know if it's going to work. Some of this is luck. Some of this is just pure hustle and skill. Do you see opportunities today, taking fitness out of it, um, that are in a similar vein right now, where like, if I were to go start a VR company, a lot of people would look at that and say, I don't think that even misses. And then in 10 years, it's actually potentially one of the leading categories.
Yes, I mean, I kind of feel I think there's loads of opportunities there for this, and I was feeling that way a lot with the lifestyle work that Meta's doing with their lifestyle accelerator. Like a lot of those ideas that are brewing there that I've seen publicly, um, for me, I question. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that in VR before, and I feel like those are kind of the moments, right, where you're like, oh, I could kind of imagine people doing that, but it seems like a little bit left field.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I definitely think that, I think everyone on this call believes that VR is going to become the next computing platform, especially if you start to broaden that and you say like, I'm going to think about that maybe as like immersive technologies, and so including AR, and then you go like, well, I believe that that's going to be the next computing platform. Um, then I think there's going to be a ton of things that aren't obvious right now that become obvious with time. Um, Especially as like, I think what has been one of the limitations on this so far is that the audience that has bought a Quest headset over the past year has skewed so heavily towards a certain type of customer, largely a younger male customer who wants to play free-to-play social games. And so that's kind of like a limiting force for these other ideas that are going to drag in other demographics. But that's exactly what Meta wants, right? And all the other platforms want. They want experiences that are going to drag in a broader range of consumers in order to make sure that the content drives this to be the next computing platform. So I think with that, like if you tap into something like this, then you can expect a lot of platform support.
And I think they're seeing that with the price point of the new Quest S. Like dropping that below $300 is going to open up this market to so many people, because now it's almost something you can buy and try. It's getting closer to that point. And so I do think this is going to have, like, over the next 10 years, like I think casual things like nature walks are really interesting. Um, like stuff that, again, you don't really think about with AR VR, but I think is going to be a pretty killer use case over the next few
A
years.
shameless plug here because I'm really interested in someone building this, and I'd love for someone to build it. But I think like finding ways to gamify skills, like take a first aid course, right? And find a way to make that where it's like a challenge that I want to compete with you, Don, around that. And I'm like, oh, I got the next level and I'm so excited about that. But you're teaching me real life skills. Like I think I would love to talk to the team who are building that. So that's my shameless plug.
Yeah, if I think about all the time I spend on YouTube just watching how to do stuff that I'm not even probably going to do just because it's interesting. It would be a totally new experience to be able to go get in hands on, even just for conversational purposes, to be able to say someone, hey, I know how to do CPR, kind of,
And
things like
and
that.
and and like all of the enterprise use cases around this show that the retention of information taught in those methods, like when Walmart do this with employee training, and one of their employee training is like what to do if someone comes into the store with a gun. And the
Mm-hmm.
retention of that information, I think, is like an order of magnitude better than if they teach it through traditional methods. And so I think you're right. I think you like take these skills and you could level up like you would retain that information better and you'd feel better about having those skills, having acquired those skills. But yeah,
Yep.
that's a very much a, side conversation.
You would be a strong advisor. So everyone should be taking notes if you don't have something right now. That's a good one. All right, so let's open up the floor for questions. Everybody here cares deeply about AR, VR. Pretty much everybody here is a founder building something. They've either raised money or they have ambitions to. So if you can raise your hand using the little react emoji at the bottom, I'll call people up. Ragu, perfect. All right, let me feature him. All right, so Pickleball One was actually one of the companies I brought to Meta when I was there. My mom found Pickleball One on a newsletter for her local pickleball team and said I need to reach out to him. So Ragu, feel free to ask your question.
All right. Sam, pleasure. Thank you, Don. Sam, pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
Quick question on fundraising and valuations and how, because we know the space, the limitations of the space, it's growing. But how do you talk to investors about exits? How do they think about exits from an XR perspective? How do you convince them to put in $30 million hoping for maybe a $500 million exit someday? What's the story? How do you present it?
Yeah, I think that has really tied back to that point I said before about finding the believers. So like when we went out to raise last time, you know, we met a lot of funds that kind of believed in VR getting to 100 million headsets. Also, a lot of the gaming funds, for say at that point in time, would say like, yeah, we're underwriting VR to like 100 million headsets. And if there's 100 million headsets, then if you take like your attachment rate, you can model out exactly what size business we would become. All things else remain the same. So like just a simple calculation. And I think what the conversation became for us, and I think it's probably similar for a lot of companies, it's like in order to like for us, it was a later stage funding round, and in order to then be for them to be able to get the fund returns to work, you really need to have more belief in the VR market than 100 million headsets. And
Right.
so for us, the math worked in that way, where finding the believers meant we had to find people who thought that this was truly going to be the next computing platform. But at earlier stages, it becomes different because the return profiles that the investors need in order to make the investment make sense are different as well, right? Like you're investing at a lower valuation. You don't need to get as high an exit valuation for the numbers to make sense. So that's how I would think about it. Like the earlier you are and the lower your valuation, the less belief that the investor needs to have in terms of your exit valuation, which is, I think, at the moment, very tied to the addressable market being the scale of VR headsets. And then you can think about that around like a 5 to 7 year time horizon probably works.
Do
So
you
yeah,
see? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, you go.
No, do you see the birth of the Orion glasses changing things in terms of how investors will look at this? Like if you have a roadmap to Orion, does that make you more valuable?
I think I was really intrigued to see how the investment community or the investor community responded to the Apple Vision Pro. And I
Yeah.
feel like this industry has had so many waves of previous hype.
Hmm.
And I think as a result, I think a lot of investors are like, okay, it's great that Apple's entering. I think it's great that Orion's arriving. But until I start to see these things actually selling and driving traction, I'm going to hold back.
Hmm.
I think like this is very generalized commentary, obviously. So there will definitely be funds that I know, having spoken to many funds that are starting to think about a thesis in VR, and that's developed over the last 12 months. So it starts to change with Apple coming in. I think last week's Connect was like it was a really big moment to showcase what the future looks like very clearly, much clearly than has ever been done before. So I'm sure that starts to tip more people over, but I don't think you see a groundswell here until you start to see real traction of consumer devices. And then what will happen is it will be, ironically, it will be late for a lot of these people to be deploying capital into this space. And what I think is interesting is you've got like a whole lot of people on this call I know are having to bootstrap and build companies with very little external financing. But what that means is when it finally tips over and the investors start to look at the space more seriously, and there will be, I believe, that moment, there's going to be a load of businesses here where people are like, wow, you've got, tens of millions of dollars and you've never raised external financing, and like the fundamentals of this business look great. Like, why was I so late to do it? So I think there'll be a tipping point. But that tipping point, I think, will be tied to a device that really starts to kick ass and scale really quickly.
Okay. Okay. And so last question, in terms of exits, do you talk about larger studios going public? What narratives play in their heads, in the investor's head? What works for them?
Yeah, I don't know if I have I've ever had a great answer to this. My answer has always been like, I'm really excited we talk about trying to build the world's first mass market fitness product. So we think like
Got it.
Peloton was on this journey to get to 100 million members and has stalled at 3 million. And so our ambition is really to take this thing to that level. I think when people talk about like, if they go like, wow, who might likely acquirers be? For us, that conversation has never really moved beyond like, well, the platforms have like, you've seen Meta acquire Supernatural in our case, but the platforms have been very active and I think will continue to be active acquiring. And then for us, there's a bunch of other strategic investors that you could put together and say like, this might make sense. But yeah, I think
like a Lifetime Fitness or somebody, who knows?
yeah, I mean, or like the apparel companies, although I think that maybe they're sitting back after. I don't think the Lululemon transaction on Mirror was particularly good, but yeah, I think like we've always been able to point to like 20 companies that might be targets. But really for us, it was centering the conversation on, hey, we're super passionate about building this into a massive, life-changing business, and that's what we're searching for.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Great questions, Raghu. Thank you very much. All right. All right, Christine. Hello, hello. Christine is building something in the fitness sports space. So do you want to maybe tell Sam a little bit about what you're building and then go ahead and ask your question? Because I think he'll be interested.
Sure. Great to meet you, Sam, and thanks
Likewise.
for talking to us. I'm building a movement-based sports games like the Wii. And our first MVP that we have is a one-on-one defense game that you compete against a trash-talking avatar. So there's no buttons to push because we want to replicate, in basketball, replicate the real game. So after that, we hope to, and we're raising right now just to get it on the Quest store. And then go from there, like one-on-one, two-on-two. Also, the AI would be programmed in real basketball strategy, so keeping it as realistic as possible. So, and I'm also a huge fitness enthusiast, competed in bodybuilding, have always been very disciplined, always been a gym rat. And so I love what you're building. And also just curious in terms of when you had the idea and you talked about, the two different perspectives on fitness with you and your partner, did you test it with people in your gym, with friends, family before you launched early access? Or did you just rely on like the Steam community to see what people were saying?
No, we did a little bit of validation with like friends and family members. I remember turning up to a party and my friends were having a house party in London, and I turned up and set up a VR headset in one of the rooms. And again, everyone thought I was like nuts, but it was very interesting to see. And I've always been quite intrigued to see how people who have never played VR, if you dump them in your experience for the first time, how do they react?
They love it. Yeah.
Yeah, but also they get overwhelmed really quickly as well, right? And so
right.
I think a lot about that the cognitive load of new people into VR as like a really interesting thing to design around. You know, one of the things we ask for in our onboarding flows in FitXR now is just like how long have you been playing VR, or how long have you been in VR for? And so that for us is a good determinant in terms of how quickly we will put you into more intense experiences. It's a better proxy for us than asking how fit someone is or how active they are before coming into FitXR.
Mhm.
But yeah, we did a lot of friends and family testing early on. And for us, it was always trying to be like we were trying to build it for a mass market audience, and therefore we wanted people from all different types, like your fitness enthusiasts, right through to people who didn't really go to the gym. We also have like if you look at the people who work at FitXR, have worked at FitXR, we have a real mixture. So we have people who have really struggled with exercise their entire lives, right through to people who run ultra marathons.
And then did you do a lot of social media before you launched?
I'm trying to think. Um, the formula for I feel like Beat Saber really for a while there at least really defined the formula for launching a new title. And that came after us. So we looked at Beat Saber and we were like, wow, we wish we did it that way. You know, like amazing influencer slash user generated like trailers and content that they leaked beforehand and built a lot of anticipation and momentum. Um, yeah, we didn't do it that way. I wish we did do it that way. It would have been probably more successful. I'm trying to think the the model I really like now is like that being able to build that passionate community. Like I've got a lot of admiration for what the gym class team have done. I think their strategy has always been and execution has always been pretty flawless. But I love like early on that team spent more time working on creator tools inside the experience than they did the experience itself. And that was really for them to be able to make it as easy as possible for people who are using gym class to be able to shout about it. And so that form of more user generated, it worked particularly well for titles in App Lab, right? Where they were blowing up on TikTok and still in App Lab and not on the main store. I think that was definitely felt like another phase of launching. But I think we'll see this continue to evolve as the store, you know, the store's obviously fully open now. I think as that evolves, like the best method of launching a title will also evolve and change.
Right. Thank you.
Great questions, Christine. And I'll add the best companies I've seen over the years that have launched successfully, it's Discord communities. Like there's not a lot of fanciness to it. It's just who can build the strongest Discord community and people that love what they're doing. All right. So Marvin and Justin, I gotta call on you after we go through our members. That's the rights of all of our proud spatial collective members. So Eli, can I call you up here to go first, please? Spotlight you.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Hi, Sam.
Thanks.
You answered part of the question that Christine raised, and it was getting back to how did you get, in the early stages of building and getting to product market fit. And I heard that you went down the broad angle, and I was kind of going back and forth. Do I go niche or do I go broad? If you were to replay this over and start over, would you go and take the broad approach? And then the second part of the question is, how did you manage the feedback that you received from a prioritization perspective? Because it just seems like you would get, like, I guess, feedback from all over, like just really broad type of feedback. And so if you could shed some light on that.
Yeah. Broad versus narrow is a really good point because I feel like we've always been broad, but increasingly we're trying to get narrower. And I feel like it might have been an impediment to us along the way. I think the struggle, like why that's been the case, is because we were initially building for ourselves. Then we launched on Steam, and that community was slightly different to what we intended initially. We learned about that community. And then as we scaled, we started to see different types of consumers come in. And as VR has scaled, again, you started to see different types of consumers come in larger numbers than others. And so like, it's definitely been a conversation for us. I'm sure it has been for a lot of other VR companies recently, which is like, okay, we're seeing a lot more younger males come into and buying headsets. Like, what should we do about that? Should we try and serve that audience, or should we continue to serve who we've always served? I think it's better to be narrower. Like if I was doing this all again, I would start with narrower and I would really understand who that customer was and how to serve them. But again, like our method was kind of different, I think, as a result of that context. I think in terms of prioritization, at the beginning, I wish I could say we were more structured with this than just like, hey, that's a good idea, let's build that. I think now what we try and do when we're talking to our community or how this has evolved is definitely trying to listen for pain points rather than solutions and trying to map these to like, okay, we're hearing like these type of customers, hearing these type of pain points. And then how do we think it from our own perspective about, what that solution state might be to address those problem statements. But yeah, initially, I think we were kind of just getting it from all angles and trying to do our best,
Yeah, great. Thanks, and congratulations on your success. It's great.
Thank you.
We'll get there, Eli. I like the Sam. I like there is luck in all this stuff, and so it's cool to know that you admit it
100%.
because it just happens.
I mean, at the end of the day as well, like the like typical business school approach, right, is you definitely don't go and build a business that's reliant on someone else's hardware rollout. And so like none of us would be working in this space if we were like following traditional business school advice. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a gut feel. All right, cool. So Tejas, Richard, Ronnie, let's get through you three because you're members, and then we'll go Marvin, and then we'll go Justin here. And then I think we'll probably be pushing up against the time. So Tejas, do you want to unmute yourself? Come up here. Let me feature you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Sam, it's nice to meet you again after Connect.
Hey there.
I was wondering in the early days of building FitXR, were there any just key product or marketing decisions that maybe didn't work out as well as you would have thought? And maybe could you share some of those lessons that you learned along the way?
Yeah. I'm trying to think about the best one. There's been loads, right? Loads of things that I would do differently. I used to naively think like, I don't understand why some VCs only want to back second-time founders. And then you make all these mistakes along the way. And then you're like, I get it. I completely see why some VCs would want to do that. I think the biggest mistake that we made that we're very lucky to have been able to come back from was raising too much money and scaling too quickly and layering in loads and loads of lots and lots of headcount. Like we were 120 people at our peak. We're now 60 and we are way more productive. We ship way more of higher value now than we ever have. And we lost track during that time of just like what sort of company we wanted to be. And so we've always shied away from process and bureaucracy, but we were laden with it. And when you start to scale in that way, you start to bring people in who think you need to be even bigger. So you start, you go to that number and you start having people come in and start building for 300 people or 400 people. And so that was, I think it's probably relevant right now for everyone as they're trying to balance, like, I'm sure everyone on this call, well, like a lot of people on this call would like to raise VC funding if they could and scale their businesses. And I think there's a real consideration to remaining small for as long as possible and being very cautious about scaling headcount, because our experience is that it took us a long time to find our rhythm from going from 20 people to 60 people. We never found it at a higher level. And yeah, I just think I now see it as like hiring as a very dangerous thing when you're raising headcount levels.
Awesome. I appreciate the honesty.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, that's 120. I mean, that's a beast of a business. You need 2 CEOs to run something like that. That's crazy. Wow. All right, Richard, let me bring you up here. And then Ronnie, you're next.
Yeah, hi, Sam. Thanks for joining us today and sharing your knowledge.
Richard just,
especially interested.
by the way, made a big life move, picked up everything, and
Yeah.
moved to San Francisco to follow his dream. So
Awesome.
congrats. Yeah.
I'm over here in Burlingame in front of the Meta offices, just kind of for the first time going for a walk around the buildings and kind of enjoying the scenery over here next to the ocean.
Love it.
But yeah, I'm interested in building kind of an educational platform, but focused around fitness and movement, and specifically like samurai swordsmanship. So kind of a little bit skill based, like you were mentioning there. So the idea is, you know, you'd be doing the physical fitness kind of in a gamified way. And what kind of inspires me these days is like DDR. And what I like about DDR is it's, you know, fun experience and, you know, gets you moving, gets you sweating. But at the same time, I feel like you're not actually learning like real dance moves or something. So that's, I think, where the power is with the VR technology is you can actually do one-to-one movements, and the things you learn in the experience can be translated to the like real world skill-based actions. So specifically, I wanted to ask, I was using VR for fitness for a little while. I ended up losing 35 pounds in 9 months. And
Congrats.
I ran into a lot of kind of issues when using VR for fitness. For instance, sweating, you have to take breaks because if you sweat too much, you might damage your equipment. Also, the lenses will fog up. Tricks you could do to kind of help solve that. But I think one of the biggest issues with VR is friction still. And of course, companies like Meta are taking big steps to try to reduce the friction. But I recently made a post where I tried to use VR for fitness, PC VR. And after like 2 hours of trying to get everything set up, I had to kind of call it quits because it was already too late to jump into VR and start.
Richard. Cliffhanger. He was
working
really
out.
good.
It's better to do something else.
Richard, we're losing you. You're coming in and out. Can you skip to the question so that we make sure we get it? Your voice is coming in and out.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but it's just unstable.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so my question is, right now there's a lot of friction with using VR headset for fitness. What is your view on that? Do you think it's currently usable for fitness, or is there still some room for improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely usable for fitness, but I also think it's there's definitely room for improvement. We talk about this a lot from, like, we call it activation energy, and exercise in general, like if you have no equipment, has activation energy. You have to, you know, stand up and get off the couch and go for a run or whatever that looks like. And I think the power of FitXR or virtual reality fitness more broadly is you can make exercise and package it in a way that's so fun and engaging, people want to come back and do it. But to your point, like if I go, I use a Quest 3, but when I would come to that headset and it wouldn't be charged, it was like a real downer and often something that became insurmountable to me getting into the headset that day. So like a docking station is a really good example of a way that makes the headset visible. So it's like sits out somewhere where you can see it, which is a nice visual cue. And B, it's always charged and ready to go. I think, to your point a little bit earlier around the suitability of devices, I think particularly for longer, more intense sessions, then sweat definitely becomes, starts becoming more of a factor. I think it's really exciting when, we're having conversations with players that are starting to think about fitness-focused headsets. And so I think we're a year or two away from seeing those come into the market. And I think there's a whole bunch of aftermarket accessories as well that you can apply to kind of the general headsets like the Quest that make it more suitable for exercise. So I think all of these things are going to make it better for people working out in the devices. Yeah.
Good insights.
So you think the solution is like a specific headset for fitness? Because I feel like there's a lot of accessories but people who just buy the headset, with the stock strap, might not have a great experience as it currently is.
I would say that I would say that it doesn't need a solution, would be my first point. Like fitness is I think still the fastest growing category on the store. So millions of consumers are forming habits around exercise in VR. But I definitely think that there's going to be certain things that that are either already in market that can be applied in an aftermarket way, docking stations, different face masks, that enhance the experience. And I think more fitness friendly devices are going to be coming in the coming years.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I think people will put up with a lot for a great experience. People drive hours to go to a 5-star Michelin restaurant. So if you deliver a good experience, people will put up with the hardware at kind of no matter what state. All right. So Ronnie, let's bring you up. Ronnie also left a comment in the chat saying he used to have 74 staff members and now they're down to 8, and he's efficient and happy. So all 3 of us have had to go through some sort of downsizing in our lives. It's not the best, but it sounds like you've landed on your feet, Ronnie. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Hey, Sam. I'm especially interested in how you think of
Can you go a little louder? It's hard to hear you, Ronnie. Sorry.
I will try. Is any better?
Barely. Maybe yell it.
Yeah, my voice is the strongest, but headset should work. I'm mostly interested in how you think about the market now, today. I mean, you've been involved since the beginning, received a lot of support from Meta. I can't talk any louder, Don. And earlier this year, Meta's focus on fitness is not what it was anymore. They've also opened up App Lab to the Meta Store. How dependent are you still on the focus and support of VR companies like those? I hope you understood anything of the question.
I heard it. Let me just reply it back to SenseCheck. It's like, how good a time do I think it is to be building fitness content in the space? Is that kind of broadly the question?
Well, more or less. I mean, you've got FitXR, and in the beginning, you had all the support from Meta, like the spotlight position, the Meta management, the marketing, everything. And now the focus has just shifted. Is the fitness market strong enough to survive without focus of Meta?
Yeah. Okay. So I think a couple of things on this. I think, Don was asking earlier about other ideas that are kind of, you can't think right now that they're going to be successful, but what would be the future categories that exist in 5 years or so? I think trying to build products in those spaces is obviously advantageous because you're able to get the support of the platforms if you can prove that it's mutually beneficial, right? And so I think there's like a general piece of guidance that has worked very well for us that I think would be applicable elsewhere, where if you can prove that a category is going to drag in a new audience that wouldn't have otherwise bought a headset, then that is very mutually beneficial for you and the platform to align around. And what comes with that is like a whole raft of support and visibility, etc. So if people are thinking like, hey, this hasn't been done, but I think it is going to work and I think it's going to drag in that audience, then I think those are the really exciting ideas in this space. I think for us, like I've never felt more confident in the future from where we stand. I feel like the space at large is only just starting to break through, but is finally starting to break through. I think it's great that you're starting to see some of the other major tech companies into this space. I think a little bit of competition, I think, is doing Meta the world of good. Like, the Apple Vision Pro launching, I think, has just made Meta stronger, hungrier, faster. And at the end of the day, that's great for developers and great for customers as well. But yeah, I think, for fitness, there's still such a road to go in terms of most people knowing that fitness is possible on a virtual reality device. Like if I went and walked down my street in London and asked people what they thought about VR, most people would say it's a fad. I tried it in 2016 and I got sick on some kind of roller coaster experience. Or they'd say like, isn't it just for gaming? And so there's still like, if we think about this technology becoming truly mass market, there's still so much road ahead of us. But I think we've got the ingredients now and the technology now, and I think the investment now for this to be a really prime time to be building in this space. And I think give the investors a couple of years, and I think they'll catch on at large. And then I think there'll be this, yeah, I think it will become a very in vogue space to be investing, like it has in various periods in the past.
Okay. Thanks for the elaborate answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Ronnie. And Sam, also, I think you're a good example that a lot of stuff that we tell ourselves about AR VR is an excuse, because you've raised the money, you've got the traction, like you built a strong business that's comparable to any SaaS business, any consumer business out there. And so, yeah, it's harder maybe in AR VR, but I think you're an example that, like, you know, no excuses. It is possible. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you here, is because you've done it, and like it's really hard to do.
Thanks, man.
Really hard to do. All right, we have time for one more question. Justin, Marvin, I'm sorry if you want to shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat, but I don't want to have time for Sam to go over because he's got kids. And Jeffrey just raised his hand, and Jeffrey's a member of our collective. So Jeff, I need you to make sure this is a good one. Pressure's on, my friend. And you've got the finale question before Sam does a sign off here.
Hi, Sam. You kind of alluded to it early on, but in your early phase, when you're planning out your development paradigm of what you want to develop, right? You had mentioned, 3 different possible apps or segments within. There's a dichotomy and a double-edged sword of what are you disclosing to an investor, so you're not looking like a one-trick pony and you've got other ideas and you need market validation of those ideas, versus keeping some things in a skunk's works, right? And keeping things kind of, yeah, well, we want to do this, this, and this as well with those dollars, because you never know which one of these could potentially be the blockbuster.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it sounds like you're in a similar position. Like, we've always been the sort of team who have had too many ideas to be able to do anything with, and so, like, I think at sometimes I've definitely found myself getting in investor conversations where we've been talking about how we see the future and all these wonderful things that could happen. And when you start layering, like, it could, you then get to a point where it can be confidence eroding, because they can think like, well, is there anything of substance here? And I think it's that, like, balancing act that I think you're already balancing in your head around being able to show traction and results and an actual product, versus like this big idea. I really believe that, and I think it's been really reinforced to me on our journey to date that, like, ideas are cheap and execution is, I think, like, it's great that we had this idea early on around what FitXR could be, but I think the execution is like really what separated us along this way. And I think investors also feel that as well. So if anything, like, it's hard to know based on stage and like where you're at with your business as well. But I would, in general, think about trying to demonstrate results as early as possible, whether that's like a demo of a product or traction from that product. And I would tone down the dream about what the future could be, but still be able to, like, articulate it. I don't know if that helps. It's kind of it's a harder one to answer in general terms.
Great advice. All right, Sam, we're at the hour. I don't want to hold you over. Do you want to give maybe like one bit of advice before you hop off to everybody here?
I just, like, I think just my thing would be, like, keep building. I know it's hard right now with investors, and it's like a top of people's mind, but I truly think, like, companies that have been built right now that aren't taking on external capital, that are bootstrapping and building amazing businesses where they own 100% of that organization are going to be extremely appealing when the market tips. And so if you all have that possibility of being able to bootstrap and to just focus on building, I would be way more focused on building than I would be on fundraising. and then I would wait for the sentiment to truly shift, and then I'd come in with maybe a smaller business because you haven't raised external funding, but I think a profitable business or a business that you own 100% of, and I think those are going to be the things that people are looking very favorably on in a couple of years. And just like a shameless plug for us right now, we're like actively hiring in a number of positions. So if people have followed our journey and are passionate about building next generation fitness, please check them out and see if anything's suitable.
Is that on your website? We have the job board there.
Yeah, on FitXR.com, you'll be able to find out.
All right, cool. I'll share that as well. All right, everybody. We'll move on to the next 30-minute session. We'll talk about some of the lessons we learned here as a group together. But let's unmute and clap it up for Sam. Sam, thanks for doing this and for your time today. Thank you very much.
Sam.
Appreciate that.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Catch you later.
Yep,
Yes.
absolutely. Marvin, I know you had your hand up. Do you want to come up here real quick and ask your question, and I can try to see if I can answer it? I apologize, not get through you in time there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you will be able to answer it, but we
Probably
can try.
not, but we can try.
Yeah, we at Accelerate VR have developed the best omnidirectional treadmill in the world, and this is obviously the ultimate tool to combine the best and most fun games with fitness and workouts. And my first question would have been if for us as a startup in the VR gaming and fitness sector, basically, it would make sense to really only focus on investors that are VR enthusiasts, or if we should also try it with gaming or fitness investors.
Hey, I've raised more than 10 million bucks. I can answer this one. Kidding me? I got this. Yeah, I would focus on people that are, like he said, focus as your top priority on people that are believers in AR VR. So a lot of people like games, but don't believe in AR VR. A lot of people like fitness, but don't believe in AR VR. So I would do everything in your power to focus in specifically on people that you found have already invested into AR VR companies in the past. I've gone through this before, but like this is the strategy that I use when I build my target list of investors. This is the process I use. I basically backtrack from I go online and I find deals that have been done in AR VR, and then I backtrack from there. And then I write down those target names. So FitXR is probably on here, so we can start with that example. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, okay, so for example, in some article at one point in my life, I read that this person, Itan Elbaz, was an investor in FitXR. And so I documented their LinkedIn and I documented the company they invested in. And then I somehow like looked online and found what was the general check. So he's an angel, it looks like. Or another example would be Play Ventures. So again, I found an article somewhere that said they invest in FitXR. And then I did my research and figured out the person that was the investor there from Play Ventures looks like it was Harry, who's the one who invested into FitXR. And so I make that list and I document it. And so like when I go through my investor targeting, I have like kind of three main phases. The first phase is that build that target list. And so that usually takes me 3 weeks of like real research, right? Like it isn't like really figuring out who are the people that love AR VR and then documenting that properly. That's phase one. Phase two is then the networking phase. And so I'll go email all of those people, LinkedIn message them, however I can figure out a way to get a hold of them. I usually try to do 30 to 40. So like I'll try to network with 30 to 40 of them. And when I do those pitches, I am very on purpose specifically saying I am not fundraising. So they'll say, how much do you want to raise? And I'll say, I'm not fundraising right now. I just wanted to meet you and see if you were interested in AR VR. So like that's phase 2 is networking, where you're qualifying as many people as possible. You as the entrepreneur are qualifying the investor to make sure they're a believer. And then, and this is something that Sam talked about and we talked about earlier in the conversation, then the third phase is the actual sprint. And the way that I do that is I look through all the people that I just spoke to that are good fits for our business. I schedule on 1 or 2 or 3 days, back to back to back, all of those meetings so that they're crammed into like a tight space on my calendar. And then I have all of those meetings, and that way I can say things like, oh yeah, I'm speaking with Play Ventures in 30 minutes. Oh yeah, I just spoke with Boost VC an hour ago, right? And it like creates some sort of kind of FOMO urgency with those investors. And then there's a whole process from there and how you go from that phase to closing. But like, if that's kind of your main question, I would focus on those 3 phases right now and go through that.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good tactic. I have a few more questions, but these are specific to Sam, so I would need to try to ask to him directly. But one that you might be able to answer is, would you recommend to basically have good cold emails directly to the investors, or are warm intros from the investors network better?
I don't think it matters. I think it's a fallacy that it matters. I've gotten a hold of some of the most amazing people through cold emails, and I've also got introduced to amazing people through warm intros. The number one thing is that before you do any of this, before you build your target list, like before any of that happens, you have to spend a lot of time figuring out like what is the golden nugget in your story that is one line that is interesting to people. And this might take you weeks to figure out. I've said this quote before, but if you want me to speak for an hour, I'm ready now. If you want me to speak for 10 minutes, I'll need a week to prepare. If you want me to speak for 30 seconds, I'll need a month to prepare. Like, you need to figure out what is the smallest nugget that you can tell your story with. And that's what you go pound the pavement with and send in cold messages or warm intros. But like, ultimately, that one little nugget is what's going to be used for warm intros. It's also what's going to be used in cold messages. And so I would think less about warm or hot or cold and think more about really focusing on the story. And that takes a lot of process to whittle down.
Makes a lot of sense. Would love to talk about this more with you.
Yep. I'm putting I'll do this real quick. So we're doing on the October 16th, I'm doing a fundraise workshop for the members. This is why I have this kind of top ahead. But I basically spent the last 2 weeks thinking about like what are all the actual tactics I used to fundraise. Everything from like how did I whittle the story down to how did I phase out my investor outreach? How did I create urgency? What were the materials I used for closing? And so on October 16th, I'm gonna go through that with everybody. So if you want to join the collective and be a part of that, you should definitely consider it. And that'll probably be like 2 hours, maybe more, of just going really through like the details of the fundraising stuff.
I've sent my application a few days ago. Is this all I need to do to join the collective?
You sent the application through the website. Let me look through it. I'm launching a new website in the next week, so I gotta look through it. But let me find it and I'll reach out to you. But yeah, just definitely come to these workshops. All right, Justin. Hello.
Yeah, hi there, Don. Gosh, it's so awesome to hear from Sam. So excited. I'm doing something that's like interactive music, and so I was curious if he had done licensing, and so I was curious how he approached that, if he had licensed like music and that sort of thing in FitXR.
That is a question I do not know the answer to. But that's a good one for Sam. That's a great question. I can say that
he must, because there's music in the app if you guys ever worked out in it. I mean, they also have a deal with Zumba. So, he has some brand partnerships, and then I don't know. I assume the music isn't, to me, isn't quite as like well known and like big hits as Supernatural's music deals, but I think they're still music that isn't library music.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody and they were saying that it was like one of the larger organizations wanted 50% in order to use their catalog. And so I was like, how do you get past that? I want 50% of your revenue if you want to use my songs. So not sure.
I can only speak from one of the deals that I was trying to do at when I was at Meta was involved licensing a like a popular music catalog. It was like $400,000-$500,000 just to license that stuff. So that's pretty unrealistic to like go build a business around at an early stage. Um, so I think probably figuring out a clever way around that, at least early on, is the best way to do that. But it would be a
Yeah.
good question. I'm sure Sam could answer that pretty quickly on email.
There's a
Thanks.
company that we license music from. If you reach out to me, I'm trying to find the name. I can't find it right now, but that's fairly reasonable. It's a few $100s per title.
Okay, very cool. Thank you.
Is it popular songs, Rigo?
Not popular songs, no.
Yeah.
There's also
I mean,
AI
there's
music, but it's a little
tons
murky.
of, huh?
Was it?
I was just saying the AI, that you have AI music like Suno and Udio, but they're currently being sued by the record industry. So I don't know if one could actually use that right now and without risk.
Hey, I can make you some tunes for a certain price. Don't worry about it.
There you go.
I've made some
All right,
really
let's
good
talk.
songs on Udio.
I love that.
If you want to hire
Yeah.
me, I've made some great songs on
There you
Udio
go.
myself.
Wait.
All right,
I love
good to
that.
There you
go.
True entrepreneur, I mean. All right, so just doing some house cleaning real quick. Doing some house cleaning real quick. So we have 2 more conversations upcoming, and then that workshop I mentioned. So 3 more conversations this month. This is for the members, so everyone's aware. Okay, so next Wednesday, we're doing basically exactly what we just did with FitXR. He would kill me if he saw that it says 11 million raised. It is 28 million raised. So everybody edit that in your eyes. But we're going to do exactly what we just did with Sam from FitXR, with Nanea from Trip. So she's also raised 28 million. She's going to come chat with us next Wednesday. That'll be private just for members. So we did this also with Inga from ShapesXR. These are like the most valuable possible conversations you can have. There are very few people that have raised 30 million bucks in XR. And we have them back-to-back weeks. So next Wednesday will be amazing when she comes to chat with us. And then the Wednesday after that, we'll do the workshop with myself. So that'll be about fundraising. And then the following Wednesday, right after that, I put together a 3 investor panel. We have someone from 7% Ventures, a partner there. They were the Oculus seed investor. So like an amazing group of investors to come chat on the panel. Hartman Capital, they're a $55 million fund and specifically are focused around metaverse, Web3, and AR, VR. So like another great person to have on the panel. And then we have a third person who's a partner at Triptych. And they're a $44 million fund that is going to come chat with us as well. So that'll be on, I think it's Wednesday, the 23rd or whatever the last Wednesday is of this month. So I'll send out, well, I don't send out, but if you want to RSVP for those, please make sure that you check out this post in school. I'm thinking maybe so all the RSVPs are here. I'm thinking maybe for this VC panel, we'll have one of our members come and pitch. And so that way we can kind of like all watch how investors handle a pitch in like a Shark Tank format. I'm not sure if I want to do that yet though, but it's potentially an idea there. But anyways, please everybody, if you can go register for those in school, I'd appreciate that very much.
For Trip, I think Keanu Reeves was the first investor.
Yeah, yeah. She
Trip.
said he's her cousin, I believe.
Which is
Josephine,
good to have a cousin, right? So
Yeah, just very briefly for Triptych. So I met one of their investors because it's Bertrand Nepveux who sold his company. I met him at AWE Los Angeles in June. He sold his company to Apple 4 years ago, launching the Apple Vision Pro actually. So it's a incredible firm, definitely super exciting. And he recommended us to join their accelerator program, and we just got the news that we're accepted. So yeah,
Whoa, let's go.
I know. Sorry.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Joseph, you've been working so hard. That's amazing. That's amazing.
I was not making this comment for that, but yeah, definitely looking forward to this chat because I know that they're super active in the field. Thank you for that. I was not making
it was just like a week and a half ago, you were swearing over email at all these investors to me. So I appreciate you finally got someone to close. That's awesome.
I know, but yeah, amazing. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, looking forward to this chat with Triptych because I know that they're super active and they're super cool. They're burners, they're super cool. So yeah,
they're amazing because they sold to Apple and they helped launch the Apple Vision Pro. Literally, the other fund was a seed investor in Oculus, and then the third one is like specifically for metaverse, and they're the largest of the three. So it'll be an awesome panel, very tailored towards XR. I'm also really excited. And speaking of cold emails, all three of those, well, two of those three came through me just sending a cold email saying, hey, we'd really like for you to come chat. So only one of those was a warm intro.
Is JP from Hartman gonna?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, JP. He is the only non-partner that's gonna come talk, but I saw him on Twitter. I just thought he was really sharp, so I reached out to him.
He's super open. Like if because I met him at AWE in June in Los Angeles. He did a panel with I think 3 founders that started and have successful VR games and apps. And I don't know if those are still available, but it was a really great panel. He was super insightful and had great questions.
When was that, you said?
At AWE in June in Los Angeles. Yeah. Because I think the topic was like, how do you find mind share on the MetaQuest store? And so they talked about pricing and marketing and different things like that.
Yeah, I just had somebody message me about pricing and stuff like that in the MetaQuest store. I think we might try to do a survey in the next 2 months because I'd be curious, like an anonymous survey around retention and things like that. Because I don't think there's good numbers around what you should be targeting. Like from user retention, 28-day retention, what's your price point? Like what's your conversion on your page? Like all that stuff is pretty opaque right now. I was thinking we should do something like that. Josephine, your hand's still up, or you? Okay, I'll lower yours here. Congrats again. That's like awesome to hear. I've seen you work at that for months now, trying to fundraise. So that's amazing. You got a quality investor there. Good work. Justin, you want to drop or mute yourself here?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm interested in participating. How do I fast track becoming a member of the collective?
Let me. Sorry, I just responded, Joanna. So you can join through this link here. I'll send an email after as well.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an awesome group. We'd love to have you. And I'll send that right after, and you can just join from the link.
Cool thing.
All right, here, wait, I'm putting. I just had to get it. In the chat. There's the link there. You should be able to click that, and you should be able to join, and then come to all these for the month. And thanks for the interest. That's awesome. Appreciate that. Cool background as well. Oh man, I just had a fever, and I was telling everybody I had to get a chest X-ray yesterday as my left lung got infected from the disease, and it's been a miserable week, but feeling good. Sorry for the coughing. long way of saying that. We're good. All right. Any other thoughts around what Sam was saying there? I think that was a really great session. Does anybody want to maybe summarize one of the lessons that they came up with during that session?
I heard less is more with respect to heads.
Yeah.
I heard bootstrap, then raise funds.
Yep.
I
Starting to be
heard
a pattern,
stay.
isn't it, Armin?
Yeah, I heard stay narrow, focus on the niche, find your niche, and drill down.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And
Focus
I think
on
he was
building
pretty open
community.
about being lucky on his niche too. Like he wasn't sure it was going to work. You know, there's a lot of Sams out there that it didn't work for that we're not having come and talk to us.
And find
Yeah.
believers in the space.
Yep.
One thing
Yeah.
I didn't understand, maybe I missed it, but did he talk about how they market? He talked a little bit, right? Initially, they did Discord and stuff, but because his solution really doesn't like would he go after VR users and convince them to do fitness, or would he go after fitness enthusiasts and say, here's a way you can do fitness. It involves a VR headset.
I saw you ask that question in the comments at the end, and I thought it was a great question. We didn't have time to get to it. I don't know the exact answer, but when like at Meta, I was talking about how we frame stuff as either accidental fitness or on purpose fitness. The accidental fitness companies usually market more towards the VR specific people. And then the on purpose fitness, which is where FitXR falls into, usually market towards the more fitness first audience. So
yeah,
I
because
think
I could
that's
see products
probably,
like his move. They would move headsets. They would sell headsets, right? His product would actually move headsets for Meta.
yeah,
Because people are serious about fitness and oh yeah, fine, $300 headset, no problem. So
that being said, still the most important market to go after are gamers as a like you still have to, that's the beachhead no matter who you are, even for FitXR.
Is it for fitness companies? 'Cause I thought that the fitness apps, like some of the big ones, maybe skew much more female and much older than the rest of the content. Maybe that's just that they skew that in comparison, but that's still the core, or it could be that that's actually the core.
I don't
So
know.
it's interesting conversation also on, like, people are talking about Discord. I know both Supernatural and FitXR actually have like large Facebook communities because of who their audience is.
Yes. It's like, I wish we asked Sam this question. I wish we asked him. All I can say is, like, I know when we would fill out the memos when it came to getting a deal done, pretty much no matter what the app was, no matter what, like the number one thing you would just have in there was current gamers in Quest, just because there's, umpteenth millions of them versus any other category out there. But
Yeah,
I do
I
think
that I was gonna say, I think that's also why Supernatural is an attractive acquisition, because of the retention, because fitness inherently has more retention than other types of products, if people are succeeding with it. But then also they had a bit of a different audience from some of the other products.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Golf Plus. I read an article on them, and their average user is 34 years old, but they're golf, so they're going to attract, I think, an older audience just because of the nature of their game.
We should have Ryan on as well. He'd be a good guest from Golf Plus. All right, Joe. Hello.
Hi. So I wanted to give just a little bit of insight of my experiences, sort of related to the niche audience versus like VR enthusiasts. So last week I launched a haunted virtual reality walkthrough at a couple of location-based places, and every virtual reality specific location, there was a little friction there because they were saying that people would only pay 83 cents a minute for VR. But when I took it to amusement parks and places that were just haunted houses, to them, this was new. This wasn't like VR. This was like a new type of attraction. And we have people paying $10 for a 3-minute experience. So it's a very different audience. And I feel like to the VR enthusiast, it's kind of like a little, oh, it's just another experience. But to the audience that it's meant for, like Halloween enthusiasts and things like that, scary places, it's a different perspective. So I just want to pass off that insight, whatever it's worth.
It's a tough one. I think Joanna makes an interesting point, though. I do think having if you can figure out how to have a different audience than the average XR app, your multiple, if you can get bought by one of these platforms, is going to be higher than the average company as well, because you're able to attract different users with a stronger retention graph. So I think that's a good way to think about it. And I think the other way to think about it, to your point, Joe, is like you just got to kind of experiment and figure out what's the truth. I wish we asked Sam that question. Rego, it's such a good question. That's the one regret I have from this, I would say.
Well, just as a note, I mean, we've been on the store for about a year. October will be a year. And our core demographic is 35 to 55, our user base. So it's in a VR store, but definitely we're hitting, that's distracting, Don. How cute. We're definitely hitting a different audience than the typical VR, gamer audience.
Who's going after dogs? They're a big market. All right, I'm gonna hop off. My throat's starting to get real hurt here. Thank you everybody for joining us. That was an awesome session. Next Wednesday, please make sure you RSVP in school. That'll be an amazing session. And then also 2 Wednesdays from now, please RSVP for the investor panel. But Nenea is next, and she's a badass, and she's raised as much as Sam, and Trip is an insanely good company when it comes to traction. So please think of questions over the next week or so, and then we'll be doing that one. That again is behind closed doors. If you want to join the collective, please consider it. We'd love to have you, and you can find the link in the chat here. Thank you everybody for joining. Adios.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Goodbye.